This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Avoid the Maze. And for those of you who have listened or watched Avoid the Maze on YouTube, you'll know that we talk about the journey of life. And I was lucky to meet Darci Steiner a couple of weeks ago. And she has a long journey, and the journey has gotten easier, then it's gotten tougher. And right now she's in a little bit of a tough spot. And I think it's really important that we understand that she may look like she's not in pain, but she shared with me the other day that just to get up from her desk and walk down the hall to make a light lunch is painful. But she's very lucky. She also has a wonderful support system, and that is her husband, Mark. And I asked that Mark be on, and I have a feeling sometime during this podcast, we're going to all be shedding a few tears because from what we hear out there aren't a lot of spouses that are willing to stand by their mate when in sickness and in health becomes sickness. And Mark, you've done that, and you've done it for a long time. And so to our listeners out there, I think we have to realize that there are some good guys in this world. So welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Karen.
So I'm going to start with you, Mark, because we are talking about spouses and caregivers. The day that Darci had that original fall, what did you think? Did you just think, oh, we're going to take her to the ER, she's going to get bandaged up, and we're going to come home and life will be normal again?
Yeah, pretty much. I had no idea what was coming and how serious the injury was. Although it was obviously serious, it just didn't yet sink in until some time had passed. So I figured, yeah, we get some medical attention and things would improve over time, maybe not right away, but I wasn't super concerned at the beginning, maybe denial or something, but just took a while for it to really sink in.
Well, they always say, no news is good news. So you just, want to believe that everything is going to be good. And how many people do fall down their steps on a regular basis? And yeah, they get a sprain, they get a bruise, they're laid up for a short period of time, and then life does go on. But Darci, that didn't happen to you. So remind our listeners what actually happened when you fell down the steps.
Yeah, so I had been, the kids and I wanted to listen to some Christmas music, and the CDs were upstairs. So I ran up the stairs. As a young mother, every young mother can relate. You run to do everything.
Absolutely.
So I ran up the stairs and ran back down the stairs, but I slipped on a piece of paper as I was running and hurtled over the baby gate somehow. The brain does funny things, but I saw the baby gate right there, but slammed into a wall, and then it twisted me, turned me around, and I face planted into the ground, injuring my back.
So, Mark, were you home at this time, or?
No, I was at work, so I had no idea what was going on.
So how long did you lay on the floor until you got some help? Because you had two little ones with you.
I know. I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember. I just remember Nicole came and plopped down beside me, and Jenny was above me, and I don't remember, Karen.
Interesting. So a piece of good advice for all of us. Let's not leave paper on the floor. And maybe we should be more cognizant of our running. But,
Yes.
All of us who live in a house that has steps, we take those steps for granted. we're up and down all the time. And I know myself that there are days that I'm walking downstairs in the morning and I have my hands full of things from upstairs that got to go down. And I don't think about holding onto the railing. I
Right.
think I know how many steps it is, and I think I'm doing a good job. And there have been many times that I find myself in the middle thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose it. And so, we can't go back and correct what happened to you, but we can think about the future as well for ourselves. And, as you continue to go on your journey. So you ended up, obviously, Mark, getting home. You took her to the hospital. How long was it before you got a diagnosis?
Well, Darcy's probably, actually, why don't you answer that? Because your diagnosis.
It didn't, I wasn't bedridden right away.
Okay.
I was able to begin to function again. But I remember the terrible pain of trying to get in the car to drive. And if anybody's ever had lower back pain, they understand what I mean. And so something was obviously wrong. And I honestly don't do this either, people. I played a volleyball game and with a bad back and ended up making it worse. And so I was still trying to function, but more and more was spending time in bed. So, it didn't stay bad while I was down on the ground. I mean, I was able to begin to function a little bit better, and then, more time in bed, and then the CRPS developed.
So what you're telling me is that you did what so many of us do. We have an accident. We look at it as just that. I'm bruised, but if I get up and start moving around, maybe ice it a little bit, take some Tylenol, lay down, rest, it's going to go away.
Right.
And I can relate to being, a female who says, I got to do it all. So obviously you had to do it all. You had to go play that, volleyball game. You don't want to be an invalid. And so you do as much as you can. And sometimes that's harmful. And so in your case, obviously the pain was getting worse. Mark, did you realize that the pain was getting worse, even though she was acting functional?
Yeah. It became more and more obvious as it got worse that there was something really serious going on. And, it overcame the denial. This reality overcame denial and just began to just seeing the expressions in her face and the difficulty in functioning and the tears and the frustration and all these different emotions that happened along the way became more and more obvious that this is a big deal, and we got to do something or try to find some way to find our way out of it.
Absolutely. Now, I know the two of you have a deep religious faith, and that has helped you through a lot of this. And I want our listeners to know, whether it's a religious faith, anything spiritual can help you get through, because like you said, Mark, there was denial in the beginning. I really don't want to see the pain on her face. She's up and around. We're going to live as normally as possible. We have 2 little kids, but you have to dig down deep inside of yourself. And I'm sure you had to do that right from the beginning, because as you saw Darci was getting worse and she needed more of you, here you are, a young dad working full time. How do you all of a sudden become a husband, a father, a full-time employee, and now a full-time caregiver?
Yeah. there, what carried me for a while was just kind of willpower. I just wanted uh, to help. I wanted to meet the needs, and that worked for a while. Just sheer determination. Um, you know, but that runs dry after a while, and you you reach the end of your resources, and I think probably a lot of times one of the first steps is you try to get help from other people,
Right.
and that ended up being one of the hard parts, because the people that we went to were very um, hit and miss, and some of the people we would have thought all along would be helpful really withdrew and couldn't really engage with what was going on, including family members,
Right.
surprisingly, and then people that we didn't know as well really rallied around us.
Mhm.
It was really surprising. I
Mhm.
mean, one of the things I think we've noticed about suffering is it really brings out the truth. It
Yeah.
brings out the truth in ourselves, in our relationship, and in our relationships with other people. And some people have the ability to come close and walk through it with you, and others don't. And so that was, there's some surprises there, in lots of ways. But your question was kind of how I found strength to
Yeah.
do this, and the spiritual side of it really was important. Um, and you, I think a lot of Christians, I can't speak for all spiritual people, but I know a lot of Christians are under kind of an impression that God will fix it. Uh, that it's kind of his job.
Right. Right.
Um, and I saw a counselor along the way who said, if God's job is to fix things, he's not very good at his job.
I remember saying that as a kid. Yeah.
And I don't mean to make light of
Right.
the fact that he will a lot of times fix things, but a lot of times not right away.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of ways he wants to refine us, as we go through these difficult times, and help us grow, and learn to be more loving, more patient, more serving, less selfish, less just focused on our own thing. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and so that took a while for that really to take hold. I Some of the people that I looked up to spiritually didn't really understand that very well, and um, so that was, for a while, actually, that was very much a part of the struggle, is what's going on, and why, we didn't do anything wrong that we're aware of. Why did this happen, and why won't he take it away?
Right.
Now in retrospect, I've seen the incredible good that's come of it, and so kind of looking back now, I feel a lot more aware of what was going on. But yeah, yeah.
Well, and you hit on something that I want our listeners to understand. We often assume that our family and friends are the ones who should jump in, know what we need, and help us out. And I think family and friends want to, but they know us so well. There's that fear. This could happen to me.
Mm,
Or, you know, if I get too close, okay, what if I don't do it right? What if I make it worse? And, you know, I remember when my son was diagnosed with autism, he was 6 years old. We had great 6 years. Nobody knew the difference. But as soon as we said that we needed some help, everybody just disappeared.
Mm.
And it was like, where did everybody go? And it's like, well, people didn't want to believe us. And I'm sure sometimes you had family and friends who saw you sitting up in your living room, Darci, and thought, oh, look at Darci. She looks beautiful today. She can't be in that much pain. She doesn't need me. And that's what people want to say because they don't want to know about the terrible things that are going on. And so I know for a long time, I resented a lot of my friends and family until I could take that step back and go, you know what? Would I have been any better? Would I have taken the time out of my day to make a meal, take you to the doctor, whatever it is? And I had to think about it. And it's like, yes, I've done that for people, but I haven't done it for everybody. And I've done it more for, I won't say strangers, but people that I'm not as close to. So, you know, there may be something along those lines. You mentioned that even your spiritual leaders didn't really understand. Have you been able to figure out why that was?
I think so, yeah. I think a lot of them hadn't experienced anything like this themselves. And so they hadn't really asked the question as urgently as you do when
Yeah.
it's happening. I mean, you can come up with cliches and sort of shallow explanations and things like that pretty easily until, life shows that they're not doing a very good job of explaining what's happening.
Right, exactly.
But I was fortunate. I did find that, I did find my way. And I think God himself led me to people who were able to have that kind of conversation and dig that deep into, okay, so, how might this, in a deep sense, beneath the surface, be a blessing in disguise, which is
Right.
so such a paradox
Yeah.
that something so horrific, and it was. I mean, to watch her suffer the way she was just a horrible experience as a husband. Um, but the in the end, I mean, as the I think things became clearer what this might really mean. It's not something we would have volunteered for,
Oh,
but
absolutely.
it really became an unexpected blessing for us.
And, I remember my mother once said to me, sometimes pain and suffering really makes us stronger. It creates a new path for us to walk down. And, I didn't really understand it. In fact, I would argue with her, why should I have pain? It's not making me a better person. But then we sat down one day and we talked about it. And I realized it really made me a much better person than I would have been without it. And I know that for a fact because I could relate to other people. I didn't have to see somebody using a walker or being bedridden to know that they were hurting in some way. So, I do believe that we are led down these paths. So, Darci, when you spent about 2 years bedridden, I know it wasn't all of a sudden that you just jumped out of bed and said, "Hey, I'm ready."
Right.
But what was it like for the two of you when you started to realize that you were getting up and around more? Were you still being dependent on Mark, or did you go back to the old way of, you know what, I'm the wife, I'm the mother, I can do it all?
Well, I'm a pretty independent person.
I know.
How do you know, Karen?
I can tell.
I would not let him do anything I could do for myself. But that was the thing. I was so desperate for help. I couldn't do anything for myself. And that was the frustration, was I just needed so much help. But yeah, when when I was starting to be able to do more and more for myself, like now, presently. I mean, paralleling both situations, today I was able to put my coat on by myself. It's a victory.
Absolutely.
Something so simple to put my coat on by myself, or no, I'm going to get the door. I had a friend come over yesterday and she was like, let me get the door. And I'm like, no, I'm getting the door because I need to get the door. I need to be able to do what I can do so that my muscles can grow back. I need to work things. I
Right.
don't need people to do things for me that I can do for myself. And I think that's important to remember, or for anybody who's listening, is to gain functionality back. We've got to do for ourselves what we can do. And we have to do everything we know, because sometimes we don't do what we know to do. We know that we should be taking our multivitamin, but we're not. So everything we know we should be doing, we should do that
We should
too.
be doing, yeah.
Yeah.
Not making excuses.
Yeah. But I can't tell you the freedom that it feels when you can gain some kind of functionality back. Like today, putting my coat on by myself and not needing help. It felt fantastic. And so back then, being able to, I remember just being able to sit up at the table and play with the girls instead of in the bed, you know, and feeling so proud. And the girls were so happy. And my goal every day is to take less off of Mark. The more I can do myself, the more I take off of him. And that's my goal every day. If I can put a plate in the sink, if I can get it to the sink and it helps Mark, that's my goal. Everything that I can do to take burden off of him or allow him to be able to work. That's my job right now. That's one of my jobs.
So, Mark, how does it make you feel, okay, when you see her doing these little things, taking that plate to the sink, but you can see that she's joyous about it because she can do it, but you also see the pain.
Mhm.
You feel like grabbing that dish and saying, no, let me.
Well, I've learned to tune in, and I'm learning. I don't think I've got it down. I'm learning better when to offer and when not to. I mean, I do understand that she does want to do as much as she can, and hates asking me to do things for her. I mean, I know she goes without things that she wants or needs, at times because she doesn't want to interrupt her. And I want to be real. I mean, I don't always have the best attitude about it. Be truthful. I mean, there's times where I don't feel like doing it, and so you know, I try to be aware of where she's at, and I have to. And when I misfire, I have to be patient. And when I offer her to do something and she says no, I need to not take that personally. And um, there's a lot of not taking it personally.
Sure. Well, and what I hear you saying too is that you are very, very human. And that's what I want our listeners to know, because you shouldn't normally be smiling with everything that you're doing for Darci. Okay. Because Darci, I think you can even relate as a mom. If you hadn't been hurt, there would have been times that your kids would have wanted something and you just wouldn't want to do it. Okay. That's normal human behavior. Sometimes we feel like, hey, when's it time for me? Or, hey, give me a break. And that doesn't mean you love her any less. It doesn't mean you're not going to do these things. But you know what? We're allowed to sometimes feel a little sorry for ourselves too. And that's when we have to look within and, ask those questions. And I don't think it really is about why me. Um, Again, my mother once told me, God never gives you more than you're able to handle. And sometimes I look up at the sky and say, I can't handle anymore. And I get more. And then I realize, guess what? I really can. I can handle it. So the two of you have been married for how long now?
30 years in December.
Wow, wonderful. But I guarantee you, when you were walking down the aisle, you never expected this journey.
Gosh, no. No. Nope.
So let's start with you, Darci. What did you see that day before you walked down the aisle? What did you imagine life was going to be like?
Oh gosh, lots of volleyball to get around the beach. We lived in LA at the time. So we loved to do that together. Working, we were young, we were just starting our jobs in LA. So, you know, just moving up the ladder in our work and eventually having kids. I was ready before Mark was. So that took a while to convince him. Um, but just a lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. And then eventually having kids and raising them and pouring into them and just, whatever normal is, being that, not being abnormal.
And so, Mark, when you saw her walking down the aisle, what did you see?
Yeah, just only good things. I mean, I think I'd acknowledge that there'd be hard things and tough times. I think had some realism to a degree, but even though you have that in your mind, you don't expect it. And I just saw a sort of standard, wonderful life. I mean, we'd be married, we'd be happy, we'd have kids, we'd have grandchildren, we'd just have a life with its bumps, but overall expected.
Absolutely. Because no life is smooth. And I don't care how pretty we make it on Facebook or even in a podcast. We all have our ups and downs. And there are days, especially when someone is in as much pain as Darci has been in, that I'm sure everybody has wanted to run away from you, Darci, and you've wanted to run away from everybody else because it's surreal. And people aren't going to understand it until they listen to your podcast, get to know you, and start digging deep inside of themselves. Who else do I know in my life who has gone through this? How have they survived? I know too many couples that split up over it because either the husband or the wife just wasn't strong enough to want to spend the rest of their life, being a caregiver. But yet that's what we say in our marriage vows, and yet we walk away from it because we just don't want to deal with it. But the fact that you didn't walk away the first time, and Darci did get better, and I'm sure it wasn't 100% pain-free, and getting your degree and working and raising a family that had its hardships as well. But when you had the second accident, Mark, how could it happen at your daughter's wedding?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, it happened at the end, not the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. Just the irony of that, and the contrast between the joy that the wedding was for everybody, with that at the tail end of it. And in some ways, it seems like, like a new chapter was begun. and not slowly,
Yeah.
very, very suddenly. And I think I've even had a little bit of comfort in that, that this is the irony is significant, that, we were able to enjoy this incredible occasion. And yet now there's we have a new chapter of life to write, and
Absolutely.
maybe different. But the previous chapter ended really well.
So, Darci, what is going on now? I know that you have pain walking, although you do walk. I know you have some dreams of places that you want to go, with your granddaughter. And I put that out there in the last one. Hey, friends and family, let's take Darci and the baby to the zoo. I think that'd be a great adventure.
Yes.
But what do you see as far as your prognosis now?
Well, I had a victory on Saturday.
Okay.
So my sister took me to the lake house where the wedding was. She took me last year and she drove into an area where she shouldn't have driven, but she drove there and got me onto a park bench that overlooks Evergreen Lake. And we sat there and talked, and she got me back in the car and we drove home. Well, we went this year and we parked in the parking lot and I walked down to the bench, which, I mean, the parking lot, we got a good spot, in the parking lot. But I walked to the bench and then I said, Dawn, will you videotape me? Because I'm gonna overcome this. I'm gonna replay this tape. I'm gonna change it in my brain and we're gonna start now. And sorry,
It's okay.
I turned on the camera and I walked as far as I could towards the lake house on the trail. And there was a post there, so I high-fived the post as far as I could go. And then I walked back. And next year we have a plan to go inside the lake house and walk by where I was injured and take a walk out of there and back to the car and drive home and be happy instead of crying on the way home.
Well, you can cry happy tears. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll celebrate on the way home.
Right.
So it's a step closer. It's many steps closer. That's the farthest I've been able to walk in 3 years, and I did it at the same place I was injured.
I mean, and
But
that is remarkable because in the last podcast when we talked, you mentioned that, you can go from your office where you're sitting right now. There's a bathroom right outside. You can get there and you can walk into the kitchen. But I mean, that was minimal and minimal to many of us. Okay. A victory for you. But now hearing this, that's a huge victory because walking outside is totally different than walking in the house.
you got it, Karen. It's different walking on
Yep.
concrete
Right.
than it is on carpet.
Yes. And that's what people have to understand. I know when I was recovering from my knee surgery, the first time I walked outside, it was like, where is this pain coming from? I didn't have it in my house.
Oh,
But as soon as I walked outside, because the ground is not even, if you're walking on asphalt when it's warm outside, the asphalt can have some spring to it. And I didn't even realize how differently I was walking. And my husband had walked me around the cul-de-sac and we came back in the house and I was in tears. Okay. And I knew mine was a recovery. Okay. At least it was supposed to be, and it has been. But, I called the doctor and I said, why can I walk in the house with virtually no pain? And he said, because your house is even for the most part.
Mm,
Things aren't changing. He
mhm.
said, but I want you to walk outside again tomorrow, because the more you do that and the more you can adjust your gait. So that's what happened with you too. I mean,
Yeah,
totally different walking.
yeah, yeah. So with God, I'm going to conquer this lake house. We're going to redo this and replay it in my brain so that my daughter's wedding day is going to be awesome
Absolutely.
without
Absolutely.
any pain.
I, I love that. And I'm so glad again that you were able to get through that wedding. You had the pictures taken the way they should have been taken.
Oh, yes.
So there's a lot of beauty in that. And there will be a lot of rejoicing when you walk into that lake house. And I'm sure your daughter is going to be beaming when
Yeah.
she gets to see that. So, Mark, as a caregiver, what words of advice do you have for a spouse who doesn't think they can do this?
Wow, great question.
You know, I think we would hope that we would be up to it consistently, and that the best part of our heart would be always where we're coming from, where we'd be um, always compassionate, always patient. We keep reminding ourselves that this her suffering is worse than mine. Um, it's not reality,
Yeah.
you know. I don't, and I think caregivers ought to be real about that, and not only with other people, with themselves, and see it more as kind of an up and down journey. That there's times you're going to be that way, and times you're not, and you want to grow into it and become more that way. And I think that's possible, and I, I believe in that. But I, there's a temptation to try to play the hero
Yeah.
and to sort of want to soak in some attention that deep down you don't totally deserve. And I think that can be a trap. And one of the problems that happens then is that people think you got it all, you don't need help, and I think there's a temptation that people around you to think if the spouse has got it, then I don't need to
I don't need the
worry.
help. Right. Yeah.
And so I think you got to be humble enough to, in the right way, not explode or tee off on people, but uh, to say, look, I'm struggling. This is hard. I need help. I just need someone to talk to. I think you have to kind of, in a way, train people how to help you.
Hmm.
I think you have to, for example, say, look, I'm not asking you to fix this, but I just need someone to be in it with me, to
I get it.
just get it. And because it's so lonely, because it's almost nobody knows what it's like. And there's a loneliness in the suffering of the injured or sick person or distressed person, but there's a real loneliness in the caregiver too. And and with that come a lot of temptations of you know unhelpful and wrong ways to handle that. um, and if you're not real, those things have a lot more power than if you are. And
Absolutely.
so even some of the leaders and people like that, they needed to be taught, um, and they needed patience. And a lot of them were leaders not because they were maybe the most compassionate or loving people. They're good teachers. They have training or things that help them fulfill an important role. But um, they really, I think, need people like me to help them understand and know more how to be helpful and how to help others be helpful. And
Absolutely. And I'm sure that's probably part of God's plan to some degree, that you'll be able to
Mhm.
share what you've been through, how you handled it. It doesn't necessarily mean the next
yeah,
spouse is going to do it exactly the same way, but they have somebody to look at and say, hey, it's possible to get this done this way. When I listened to you, did you ever take time for self-care? I think we lost our connection.
not
There we
able.
are. Okay,
I
we had lost the connection for half a second. So did you take any self-care for yourself?
lost again.
Are you there
Okay.
now?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what's going on. Internet spies, I guess. So what did you do to take care of yourself?
You know, I did a number of things. I mean, I managed, even with the time demands, to set aside time uh, to read my Bible, to pray, to talk with people about what was going on. I'm not at first, but eventually got into a good exercise routine. The doctor that I had, when I described the situation and asked him for medical advice, that just right out of his mouth, he said, "You got to exercise." And so I took up running, and that has just saved my bacon.
I'm sure it
Uh,
has.
yeah,
Absolutely.
because when I can leave, I can't always leave, but when I can, it just gives me a real healthy outlet for energy and just get outside and breathe hard. It's just good physically and mentally emotionally to do that. Yeah.
Well, self-care is extremely important.
Mhm.
And under the best of circumstances, many of us don't take care of ourselves. But in a situation like this, you have to. And I agree with you. I'm not a runner, I'm a walker, but walking allows me to escape from what I'm going through, or allows me to at least go through that cycle in my head without anybody really watching me about how I want to deal with this. And I know the weather's going to start to get bad in Colorado. You're going to have winter before we realize it. Feels like winter here in Cleveland today. But I have to remind myself that as long as I'm able to get out there, I have to do that. That is what I do for me. My husband is one who, you know, he'll come into the office and he'll turn on his computer. And for him, it's just surfing the net, just being in another world. And many times I'll say to him, "What were you looking at?" And he has no idea, and he doesn't care. It was just that the
Yeah.
door was closed and nobody bothered him, for a half hour, an hour. So whatever it takes for you to take care of yourself is important. Well, you both are delightful. Darci, I feel like I've known you my whole life.
Yeah,
And
but
we're going to keep these conversations going because it is important. But I want you to tell our listeners about your podcast, how they can find you, because you're keeping this story alive there as well.
well, I don't have my own podcast. I kind of do, but I kind of don't. I mean, I haven't been podcasting, but I'm just a guest on podcasts. But I do have a website that I put out a newsletter for. So I'm sure you'll put that in the show
Right.
notes.
Yes, absolutely.
So I have a website, and then I have a book. I have two books that I wrote: Beauty Beyond the Thorns, Discovering Gifts. Looks like this.
Yes.
And then I have a study guide that goes with it. So it's good for Bible study groups. It's good for recovery groups, book clubs, or independent study. So I enjoyed writing the book. Um, and can I brag on my husband?
Absolutely.
Can I tell a story
Yes.
that I think would help listeners? Okay. Mark has created the most beautiful dates for us, despite my disability. He's put creative thought into each of these. We went camping. I can't go camping, but we went camping in our living room. He put up the tent, he put plants around it, and he bought a star thing, to put lights on. He recorded sounds of animals and crickets chirping, and we had a camping date. And I love archery, and he bought me this little play archery thing, and we killed Simba.
Poor Simba.
We killed Simba with my little
It
play.
was him or us.
But the thought and the time to still invest in dates for someone who's disabled. We had a blue date. We ate blue food. There was blue lighting, blue music, songs with the word blue in it. He downloaded. We had blue potatoes,
Blueberry juice.
blueberry.
Ooh,
We had a blue date, like a creative, and it took
absolutely.
both of us out of our darkness and gave us romantic evenings. I couldn't put something like that together, but he has. He's used his creativity to figure out, okay, we can't go camping. Yeah, we can, just in a different way. And it was one of the most fun. I probably had more fun camping in our living room than I would have on a campsite.
Well, I definitely would, because campsites don't excite me. So.
But I like camping,
Yeah,
and he brought that to me.
Right, exactly.
So I just wanted to say that, because I think that could help some listeners too, is use your creativity. It doesn't have to be all dull, it doesn't have to be all sorrow. We can still enjoy and, use our creativity to do things differently. And Mark,
And I think that's wonderful. It sounds like do you have pictures of it? Because you should post them if you do.
we do.
You should post them. That would be great, because that will give people a visual of, hey, this isn't that difficult to do. And maybe you don't have to go out and do it as big as you did, but you're right. It's the thought that counts. I think I mentioned this in one of our talks before, that I took care of my mother in the last 2.5 months of her life. And she didn't know that she was blind. She didn't know that she was going through dementia. And she just kept saying, why can't we go someplace? And so we moved her bed around, and, we jiggled on it. And I told her I was taking her for a ride. And I told her I was taking her to the zoo. Heaven knows why I even said the zoo, but I
The
did.
zoo.
Yeah.
Oh, the zoo connection.
Yeah. And, she kept saying, why are you taking me to the zoo? I don't like the zoo. And I said, oh, that's okay. We're going. And you could tell she could feel that's what we were doing. And I mentioned that to friends, and they said to me, well, that was sort of silly. I said, no, you should have seen her light up, because first of all, she was sort of arguing with me. She didn't want to go to the zoo, but she kept saying, why don't we go here? Why don't we go there? And I said, well, we'll do that afterwards. So it's connecting with somebody, giving them something that gives them some joy. And it sounds like that's what your sister did this weekend.
Yeah. Yeah. I will never forget it. And she was in on it with me. And she's been a gem through this whole thing too. I've been very fortunate to have her close by, and she's helped Mark out. She would come over when I needed somebody to be with me and Mark needed to go to work or whatever. I have her too. So I'm blessed.
Well, I think we all need to be more aware, open up our eyes, open up our hearts. We never know when this is going to happen to one of us. And, when they say do unto others as you would have them do unto you, that golden rule, I mean, it's right here because two people married going on 30 years, your struggles are not anything that you planned for, and yet you're living through them. So God bless the two of you. We're going to do this again. Darci, I want to have your daughters on because, boy, they went through a lot over the years, and they've become strong young women. And maybe we could even get a glimpse of the baby or something, because that to me is
Ooh.
exciting.
Yeah, she's fun to show off.
I'm sure she is. And you and Mark take care of her once a week, right?
Yes, we do.
That's
Yeah, I sit on the floor on a mat and she pretty much stays by me. It's very cute. I've told you that before.
right.
Then when there's an emergency, I'm like, baby falling, baby eating electric cord, and he'll come running and save her. But we figured out a way for me to be able to be with her and help care for her together. I can't do it alone, but we do it together.
Wow. That's another great thing that your love has provided for the two of you. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. To the other spouses out there, you don't have to have a halo over your head to be a loving spouse and to be a caregiver. You just need to have a heart, and you have that. Thank you very much. We'll talk soon.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.